My name is Aiden Koda, and thank you for watching. I will be discussing art and its relation to the civil rights movement. During the 1960s, history and culture were forever changed as the civil rights movement came into the forefront of political activism. Music, literature, and art began to take the shape of these burgeoning ideas and commentaries. Art began to express a multitude of emotions expressed by African Americans that couldn't be translated by words. Powerful imagery and symbols became indicative of civil rights. We will discuss three important artworks that embody the spirit and feelings of the civil rights movement. All three pieces show different styles, different images, and different content. However, the feelings of frustration, defiance, and need for change are shown throughout each piece by their respective artist. The first piece I will be discussing is Norman Lewis's Evening Rendezvous. The piece itself is very abstract and uses distinct color. Looking closer, we see people emerge from the white blobs of paint. These figures are the Klansmen that haunted Black people for much of the 20th century. These colors of red, white, and blue mock the patriotism that the Klan promoted. The more you look at the painting, the more feelings of uneasiness and fear begin to emerge. The red color appears to look like a bonfire, a typical ritualistic activity put on by the Klan. It also mimics the appearance of blood and death. Looking closely, we can also see weapons and crosses held by the figures, echoing the threats of violence toward the African American community. Norman Lewis himself was born in Harlem in 1909. Growing up in a predominantly Italian and Jewish neighborhood exposed him to racial inequality at a very young age. Lewis went on to be one of the leading figures for the abstract expressionism movement, which is demonstrated in his self-portrait on the right and his Evening Rendezvous piece. His pieces tend to focus on urban life and the struggles of racial injustice. Next, we have a very iconic painting that was actually installed in the White House by Barack Obama. It is Norman Rockwell's The Problem We All Live With. In the painting, we see a young girl flanked by men in uniforms, with hate language and a smashed tomato decorating the wall behind her. The subject of the painting is Ruby Bridges, who, as a young child, just starting kindergarten, was the target of anger and violence because she was the first Black person to attend an all-white school. This painting is very shocking. The child herself stands out in the painting. She wears a pure white dress, highlighting her innocence. Her placement in the scene causes the viewer to feel her anguish and the fear she must have been feeling. There are multiple signs of tension within this painting as well, through the faceless guards and the smashed tomato. The audience facing her cannot be seen, but through these combined elements, we can picture the hate and the rage they were spewing at her. The creator of the painting is Norman Rockwell, who was born in New York City in 1894. Rockwell tended to focus on everyday American scenes, mainly depicting small-town culture. However, this did not keep him from commenting on social issues. Rockwell once said, quote, "Maybe as I grew up and found the world wasn't the perfect place I had thought it to be, I unconsciously decided that if it wasn't an ideal world, it should be, and so painted only the ideal aspects of it." End quote. After the death of his second wife, his desire to depict social issues in his art increased. He is still remembered as one of the greatest American artists of all time. The final piece I will be discussing is the screen print, titled Unite, by Barbara Jones Hogu. This piece is much louder and bolder than the previous two pieces we discussed. It demonstrates the intensity and anger of Black Americans during the Civil Rights Movement. We see a couple of symbols of Black power in this piece, through the raised, clenched fists and assimilation of the people depicted as a unified whole. The colors are vibrant and reflect the high energy of the piece. It conveys the message of the art group called the African Commune of Bad Relevant Artists, or AfriCOBRA for short, that Jones Hogu was a part of. One of the group's goals was to energize and uplift the Black community, which this painting does very well. Barbara Jones Hogu is an artist and educator from Chicago, Illinois. She was an extremely prominent artist of the Black arts movement through the 1960s and 1970s. She was a prominent member of both AfriCOBRA and the Organization of Black American Culture. Through her prints, she has demonstrated Black independence and artistic expression. All three works are very different in terms of style and content. Evening Rendezvous shows us some of the context and foundation of the violence and hate against Black people in America. The Problem We All Live With shows us the result of resistance of this violence and how it affects the basic rights of Black people. Unite demonstrates a sense of unity and pride among Black people, that after all that is thrown at them, they are still resilient and powerful. We see the color red throughout all three pieces. Red is powerful because it evokes feelings of anger, pain, and frustration. It also symbolizes power, bloodshed, and energy. The reason these are so powerful is because they were visual messages to empower Black people, to let them know that they were not deserving of such treatment and that unity was available to them. Throughout the 1960s, these demands for equal treatment were made by ordinary people who participated in meetings, boycotts, sit-ins, and marches. Scholar Larry Neal wrote that, quote, Black art is the aesthetic and spiritual sister of the Black Power concept. The Black arts and the Black Power concept both related broadly to the Afro-Americans' desire for self-determination and nationhood, end quote. Unfortunately, the fight for civil rights is not yet over. Racial discrimination and inequality are still present in our country. The ideas and symbols instilled by the artists of the Black arts movement are still relevant today. The images of marches and riots that we've seen from the 60s are not things of the past. By learning and understanding Black artists, we give them a voice. By learning, we can recognize our own privileges. We can recognize inequality in our systems. We can recognize injustice. Let Black artists be heard. With this concludes the end of the video. Thank you for joining me in this discussion of art and the civil rights movement.